Usually when we talk about the internet on this deep dive, we use all these like really expansive open air metaphors.
Right, like an open highway or a global town square.
Exactly, a boundless digital frontier.
Mm-hmm.
It's built entirely on this premise that you just, open a browser and you step into the world.
Because the whole architecture of the web was originally designed to be borderless, like access was just the default setting.
Right. But imagine waking up tomorrow and finding out that someone has built this massive invisible wall right through the middle of that town square.
Oh, man.
And hanging on that wall is just a giant neon do not enter sign for anyone under the age of 16.
Yeah, which sounds crazy, but here we are.
Yeah, because as of today, June 15th, 2026, that is no longer a hypothetical scenario. The UK government, led by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, has just dropped an absolute bombshell.
A total bombshell.
They have announced a near-blanket ban on social media for anyone under 16, and it's coming into effect in spring 2027.
I mean, we are looking at a fundamental rewiring of digital society here. This isn't just, a slight policy tweak. It's a seismic shift in how a modern democracy interacts with the internet.
It really is. And because this is such a massive political lightning rod, I just want to set the ground rules for our deep dive today.
Good idea.
We're not here to tell you if Starmer is like a savior protecting our youth or a censor who's destroying the open web. Our job is just to look at the anatomy of this ban.
Because the details are wild.
They really are. We've spent the whole morning digging through official UK government fact sheets, listening to these intensely passionate radio monologues, reading boots-on-the-ground interviews with teenagers, and looking at some really sharp critiques from human rights groups like Amnesty International.
Right.
So we want to figure out how a government actually tries to build a wall around the internet, why they are so desperate to do it, and, well, what happens to the global web if they succeed.
So to really understand the sheer scale of this, I think we have to start with the blueprint itself. Like, what is actually being banned?
Let's get into it.
The government is calling this the Australia Plus model, and the fine print is incredibly intricate. By spring 2027, under 16s will be explicitly banned from major social media platforms. We're talking TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, X, and the main YouTube platform.
Which effectively deletes, like, the entire digital ecosystem for a modern teenager.
I mean, on paper, yes, but the government fact sheets carve out some highly specific exemptions.
Okay, what kind of exemptions?
Well, messaging apps like WhatsApp and Signal, they are not included in the ban.
Interesting.
Yeah, and online gaming platforms, specifically Roblox, are exempt. Oh, and YouTube Kids will still be allowed, even though its parent platform is totally restricted.
Wait, let me stop you right there, because the logic of those exemptions feels completely counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, how do you ban YouTube but leave Roblox and WhatsApp wide open? To me, this is like trying to quarantine a highly contagious virus in a house, but leaving all the air conditioning vents running.
That's a really good point.
Right. Kids communicate, they share media, they form massive social groups on Roblox and WhatsApp every single day. The social currency is just going to travel through those vents instead.
Well, the government is attempting to draw this highly technical line between different types of platforms. They're targeting platforms designed for social interaction and broadcasting.
So the algorithmic feeds?
Exactly. The feeds designed to keep you scrolling. They view WhatsApp and Signal as just utility tools for direct communication and Roblox as gameplay. But your quarantine analogy hits on the exact tension critics are pointing out.
You said the lines are blurry.
Incredibly blurry. A WhatsApp group can have hundreds of people broadcasting media. It's essentially a private social network at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And looking at the plus part of this Australia Plus model, the government isn't just targeting the under 16s, right? They're fundamentally altering the user experience for older teenagers as well.
They really are. For 16 and 17-year-olds, the restrictions get into the actual architectural mechanics of the apps.
What do you mean?
The government is planning to mandate nighttime curfews on these platforms.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're forcing tech companies to disable infinite scroll functionalities. Plus, live streaming and the ability for strangers to direct message them will just be switched off by default.
Disabling infinite scroll is fascinating because that targets the exact psychological mechanism that makes these apps so addictive.
Exactly. It adds friction back into the system.
Right. You actually have to click a button to load more content, which breaks that, that subconscious dopamine loop.
And they are taking that psychological intervention a step further, too. Tucked into these regulations is a complete ban on intimate and sexual chats with AI for anyone under 18.
Oh, wow. So they aren't just trying to block access, they're trying to legislate the actual code and features of the internet.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the most pressing question. Why? I mean, to push a policy this drastic, the perceived harm has to be astronomical.
It does.
And the government consultation found that 90% of parents backed this ban. Getting 90% of people to agree that the sky is blue is hard enough. What is driving this intense consensus?
Well, it comes down to a profound sense of psychological danger. Parents feel they're fighting a losing battle against an adversary they can't even see.
Right.
If you look at the radio broadcast from LBC's James O'Brien, you really start to understand the emotional weight here. I mean, he was nearly brought to tears on air.
I listened to that. It was intense.
He called this legislation Starmer's greatest legacy. He actually described social media as a cancer being removed from the body politic to detoxify the bloodstream of young people.
He didn't just use abstract metaphors either. He gave these deeply specific, harrowing examples that his wife, who's a child psychotherapist, provided.
Yeah, that part was heavy.
This isn't a conversation about kids just, spending too much time staring at screens or missing out on playing outside. We're talking about algorithms that actively fetishize and romanticize severe psychological harm.
The mechanism of how this works is chilling. O'Brien described this highly popular subculture where videos are heavily stylized to look like a beautiful, bucolic idol.
Right.
Imagine, like a teenage girl walking down a tree-lined avenue, beautiful acoustic music is playing. She's wearing these ethereal, flowing robes. And in the middle of this highly idealized aesthetic video, she cuts herself.
Oh, without a single trigger warning. Which is the most terrifying part. And the algorithmic engine behind it just makes it worse.
That is the core issue. The algorithm doesn't understand context or harm. It only understands engagement.
Right. The machine is blind to the content.
Exactly. If a child lingers on that specific self-harm video for just 1.5 seconds longer than a comedy sketch, the machine registers that as a positive engagement metric.
Oh, man.
And then it will relentlessly pump that specific type of self-harm imagery into that child's phone day and night. It creates this customized echo chamber of despair.
O'Brien also made the point that these platforms reverse engineer the psychology of the child. The community surrounding these videos tells the kids that if their parents try to take the phone away, the parents are the enemy who are trying to deny them this quote-unquote beautiful support system.
It fundamentally changes the psychological landscape of childhood. Multiple sources we looked at highlight the loss of the ability to close the door.
What do they mean by that?
Well, 10 or 20 years ago, if a teenager faced intense bullying or peer pressure, they could walk home, shut their bedroom door, and have a physical reprieve from the anxiety.
The trauma stayed at the school gates.
Exactly. But today, the trauma follows them home in their pockets. They get push notifications about it. They know a conversation is happening about them in a group chat they aren't even in,
Right.
which forces the developing brain into this state of perpetual emotional vigilance.
Which completely explains why the stakes feel like life and death for so many families. The sources explicitly bring up Esther Gay, whose daughter Brianna was tragically killed by two teenagers.
Yeah.
During the trial, it was revealed that one of the killers had been heavily influenced by dark online materials, including videos of murder and torture. Esther Gay was on BBC Breakfast saying this ban will literally save lives, offering her full backing.
When you have bereaved parents pointing directly to the technology as a contributing factor to violence, it creates a deeply compelling argument for state intervention.
I hear that, and the emotional weight is completely undeniable. But I have to push back here on behalf of every skeptic listening right now.
Go for it.
Historically, society always panics about whatever new media the youth are consuming.
Right.
In the 80s, people said Dungeons and Dragons was satanic.
Oh, yeah, the satanic panic.
Then video games were going to create a generation of violent criminals. Then television was going to rot our brains. None of that actually happened. If you were listening to this and thinking, isn't this just the newest version of a classic moral panic? Well, you are not alone.
It is definitely the most common counter-argument. Critics point out that millions of teenagers use social media daily and lead perfectly healthy, well-adjusted lives.
But O'Brien tackled that exact defense on his show with an analogy I thought was just brilliant. He brought up David Hockney, the famous artist.
The one who smokes all the time.
Yes. He has smoked like a chimney his entire adult life and is currently approaching 90 years old. O'Brien argued that just because David Hockney smoked and survived, no sensible person looks at him and says, see, lung cancer's a lie, smoking isn't lethal. The argument is that social media is the new tobacco.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates the public health perspective. The assertion from these parents and lawmakers is that we now have the epidemiological data, like the skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, and self-harm, to prove the systemic toxicity of these algorithmic platforms.
Right, the data is there.
The fact that the David Hockneys of the digital world exist doesn't negate the lethal risk the product poses to the broader population.
Okay, so if the data is that conclusive and the public health argument is really that strong, how do you explain the absolute firestorm of backlash?
It's massive.
Because it is not just tech billionaires complaining about losing revenue. There is a huge petition with over 130,000 signatures demanding the government stop this. Human rights groups are furious. If the data on self-harm is so stark, how do groups like Amnesty International justify fighting this ban?
Because they believe the government is fundamentally targeting the wrong entity. Carrie Moscajuri, the chief executive of Amnesty International UK, summarized their stance perfectly. She called the ban the right diagnosis, wrong prescription.
Meaning they agree the kids are being harmed, but they disagree on the medicine.
Precisely. Amnesty's argument is that the problem isn't the existence of children online. The problem is that social media platforms are unsafe by design.
Right.
These companies operate on a surveillance-based business model. They rely on invasive profiling, data harvesting, and manipulative features to maximize engagement at all costs.
So it's the business model itself.
Yeah. And by banning the children, Amnesty argues, the government is treating the victims as the problem, rather than holding the multi-billion-dollar tech giants accountable for building toxic environments.
You know, it's like a train company that refuses to fix the faulty brakes on its trains, resulting in passengers getting hurt. The government's solution here isn't to force the company to fix the brakes. It's just to ban anyone under 16 from riding the train.
That's exactly it.
Does this ban essentially give the tech billionaires a free pass? I mean, they don't have to change their algorithms. They just have to check IDs at the door.
That is the exact critique. If you kick the kids off the platform, the addictive algorithms, the endless scrolling, and the surveillance models remain completely intact for everyone else, you haven't solved a corporate design problem. You've just instituted an access ban.
And for the teenagers themselves, the impact of that access ban is pretty devastating. We looked at a series of BBC Vox Pops with the kids actually affected by this, and they aren't just complaining about losing silly dance trends.
No, not at all.
For them, social media is foundational infrastructure. One teenager explained that they rely entirely on social media to promote their music on Spotify, like it's their only marketing tool.
Wow.
Another relies on a private Instagram account just to share memories with a close-knit group of friends who live far away.
The 130,000 signature petition echoes that exact sentiment. For many marginalized youth, especially those living in isolated areas or dealing with unsupportive home environments, social media is a literal lifeline.
A support system.
Yes, it is the only place they can find a community that actually understands them. Severing that connection could induce its own kind of psychological trauma.
Plus, we really have to talk about the psychological blowback of the ban itself. We read this fascinating blog called Hyperfocused, written by a dad with 2 kids under 16.
Oh, that was a great read.
He warned that by legally banning these apps, the government has instantly weaponized teenage psychology against itself. They have turned TikTok and Instagram into the ultimate forbidden fruit.
Which completely changes the dynamic of how a teenager interacts with the technology. It's no longer just an app, it's a contraband item.
Exactly. Finding workarounds is going to become tied to their social identity. Teenagers are going to take immense pride in bypassing the government ban and sharing with their peers exactly how they hack the system. It becomes a badge of honor, an act of rebellion.
Which brings us to the ultimate reality check of this entire deep dive.
Let's hear it.
Regardless of whether you think this ban is a life-saving intervention or a draconian human rights violation, how on earth does a government actually enforce an internet ban on millions of highly motivated, tech-savvy teenagers?
Right. My neighbor's teenager can figure out my new Wi-Fi password in about 3 seconds. How does a government bureaucracy build a digital wall that a 15-year-old can't tunnel under before breakfast?
According to the government fact sheets, the burden of enforcement falls entirely on the platforms, not the children. The UK regulator, Ofcom, has until October to finalize what they are calling highly effective age assurance measures.
Highly effective age assurance measures. Okay, let's translate that from bureaucratic speak. What does that actually look like in practice for you, me, and every other adult listening right now?
This is where the policy impacts everyone, regardless of age. To prove you are over 16, platforms will have to implement stringent identity checks.
Like what?
The proposed methods include mandatory face scans to estimate age based on facial geometry, running credit card checks, linking accounts to voter registration records, or requiring you to upload a government ID like a driver's permit or a passport.
Wait, hold on. Let me get this straight. In order to scroll through memes on X or watch a cooking video on Instagram, adults are going to have to scan their faces or hand over a copy of their passport to Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk.
Basically, yeah.
I can't imagine anything going wrong with that.
It is the most likely technological reality of the policy. The platforms have to prove to the government they are keeping kids off, and the only way to do that is to verify everyone's identity.
Talk about a glaring paradox. The government is launching this policy to protect children's privacy and safety from manipulative tech companies. But to enforce it, they are essentially forcing every single citizen to hand over their most sensitive biometric data and government IDs to those exact same tech companies.
It is a profound contradiction that has civil liberties groups sounding a massive alarm. Big Brother Watch issued a stark warning that this policy effectively turns social media platforms into digital ID checkpoints.
Digital ID checkpoints. That's scary.
They argue it represents an enormous privacy intrusion for every internet user in the country, completely destroying the concept of online anonymity.
But if you're listening to this thinking, well, my teenager is just going to use a VPN to get around it, you are already a step ahead of the lawmakers because we actually have data on how this plays out in the real world. We need to look at what the BBC calls the Australia warning.
Right. Australia implemented a very similar ban back in December 2025. And the data, 6 months post-implementation, shows massive, systemic non-compliance. According to Australia's own internet regulator, 70% of parents admit their kids are still actively using the banned apps.
70%. How are they bypassing the digital checkpoints?
Through incredibly simple methods. They're using VPNs, virtual private networks.
Right.
For those unfamiliar, a VPN essentially puts a digital disguise on your phone. A teenager in Sydney can use an app to route their connection through a server in Tokyo or Los Angeles. The social media platform thinks the user is in an unregulated country and just grants them access.
Because how does a local regulator fight a global disguise?
Exactly. Beyond that, kids are using fake IDs or simply registering accounts using their parents' email addresses.
In one of the BBC interviews, an Australian student casually noted that out of 170 kids in her grade, only 3 had actually gotten off social media. 3 out of 170. So the supposedly impenetrable wall is essentially made of Swiss cheese.
And this raises a terrifying question about unintended consequences. Tech firms like Meta and YouTube are warning the government that if you ban mainstream platforms where there is at least some moderation, algorithmic oversight, and parental control tools, you are going to push teenagers into the dark, entirely unregulated corners of the web.
Which is much worse.
You drive the behavior underground where it can't be monitored at all.
Wow. And on top of the domestic logistical nightmare, this is spiraling into a massive geopolitical showdown, too.
Absolutely. The vast majority of these platforms are American companies. The U.S. government has already issued warnings to the U.K. about putting disproportionate compliance burdens and massive financial penalties on American firms.
Right. So fine.
And this friction is peaking right as Prime Minister Starmer heads to the G7 summit to meet with Donald Trump. The U.S. administration favors chronological feeds and strict time limits, not outright bans. This domestic tech policy could easily trigger a major trade and diplomatic conflict.
So let's take a step back and look at the monumental scale of what we've uncovered today. On one hand, we have an audacious, deeply emotional government intervention aiming to pull an entire generation of children out of an algorithmic ecosystem that is causing undeniable, documented psychological harm.
True.
And on the other hand, the mechanism required to achieve this is sparking valid fears of mass surveillance, digital exclusion for vulnerable teens, and a geopolitical clash with the most powerful tech giants on Earth.
Which is exactly why you need to care about this even if you don't live in the UK, and even if you are well over the age of 16. The UK is currently acting as the global test case.
Everyone is watching.
The entire world, from Washington to Brussels, is watching. How this enforcement plays out over the next year will determine the trajectory of the internet itself. It will decide whether the future of the web remains that open highway we talked about, or if it permanently transforms into a heavily gated community where you're required to present biometric data and a digital passport just to enter the town square.
Which brings us right back to that giant neon do not enter sign. We know that teenagers are inherently wired to test boundaries, to poke holes in the fence, and to build their own spaces away from adult supervision.
Yeah, they always find a way.
So I want to leave you with one final lingering question to mull over. If this ban somehow actually works, if the digital ID checkpoints hold, and millions of teenagers are successfully locked out of the mainstream internet overnight,
Right.
what kind of entirely new, invisible, and completely unmonitored digital underground are they going to build for themselves? And will it end up being far more dangerous than the platforms we just rescued them from?